embraced and convened. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming together to once again immerse ourselves in words, deeds, and relationships of Torah. So in just a moment, we'll begin reading our Torah portion, which is Parshat Terumah, which is found in the book of Exodus, chapter 25, beginning with verse 1. And in just a moment, I'll invite all of us to unmute. We can say together our blessing for the opportunity of sharing words and relationships of Torah with one another. And then I'll begin reading the first few verses, and then I'll invite everyone to have an opportunity to share in the reading of the verses.
Oh, wow.
When we've concluded reading the Torah portion, I'll share with you a very focused study of an aspect of this week's Torah portion, and then we'll open it up and everyone will have an opportunity to share their reflections about this week's Torah portion. So again, we are in Parshat Terumah, Exodus chapter 25, beginning with verse 1. And at this point, I'd like to invite everyone to go ahead and unmute, and then we'll say together our blessing. So together, let's recite our bracha for studying Torah together. Baruch
atah Adonai
Eloheinu
melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav etzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Thank you, God, for this opportunity to share in words, deeds, and relationships of Torah. So you go ahead and mute once again, and then I'll begin the reading, and then I'll invite others to have an opportunity to share in the reading of Torah verses as well. Chapter 25, verse 1. Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, "Tell the Israelite people to bring me gifts. You shall accept gifts for me from every person whose heart shall move them. And these are the gifts that you shall accept from them: gold, silver, and copper, blue, purple, and crimson yarns, fine linen, goat's hair, and ram skins, dolphin skins, and acacia wood, oil for lighting, spices for the anointing oil, and for the aromatic incense, lapis lazuli and other stones for setting, for the ephod and for the breastpiece. And let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them, exactly as I show you, the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its furnishings, so shall you make it." We're now on verse 10. And Ruth, would you like to unmute and read a few verses beginning there?
Yes, thank you, Rabbi. From 10?
Yes.
Okay. They shall make an ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 cubits wide, and 1.5 cubits high. Overlay it with pure gold. Overlay it inside and out, and make upon it a gold molding round about. Cast 4 gold rings for it, to be attached to its 4 feet, 2 rings, one on one side of its side walls, and 2 on the other. Make poles of acacia wood and overlay them with gold. Then insert the poles into the rings on the side walls of the ark, for carrying the ark. The poles shall remain in the rings of the ark. They shall not be removed from it. And deposit in the ark the tablets of the pact, which I will give you.
Thank you so much, Ruth. You can go ahead and remute at your end. And I'll invite Jim and Peggy. Would you like to unmute and read a little bit beginning at verse 17?
Thank you so much. You shall make a cover of pure gold, 2.5 cubits long and 1.5 cubits wide. Make 2 cherubim of gold. Make them of hammered work. at the two ends of the cover. Make one cherub at one end and the other cherub at the other end. Of one piece of the cover shall you make the cherubim at its two ends. The cherubim shall have their wings spread out above, shielding the cover with their wings. They shall confront each other, the faces of the cherubim being turned towards the cover. Place the cover on top of the ark, after depositing inside the ark the pact that I will give you. There I will meet with you, and I will impart to you from above the cover, from between the two cherubim that are on top of the ark of the pact, all that I will command you concerning the Israelite people.
You shall make a table of acacia wood, 2 cubits long, 1 cubit wide, and a cubit and a half high. Overlay it with pure gold and make a gold molding around it. Make a rim of hand's breadth around it and make a gold molding for its rim round about. Make 4 gold rings for it and attach the rings to the 4 corners at its 4 legs. The rings shall be next to the rim as holders for poles to carry the table. Make the poles of acacia wood and overlay them with gold. By these the table shall be carried. Make its bowls, ladles, jars, and jugs with which to offer libations. Make them of pure gold, and on the table you shall set the bread of display to be before me always.
Thank you both so much. Martine, would you like to read beginning at verse 31?
Thank you, Rabbi. You shall make a lampstand of pure gold. The lampstand shall be made of hammered work. Its base and its shaft, its cups, calyxes, and petals shall be of one piece. 6 branches shall issue from its sides, 3 branches from one side of the lampstand and 3 branches from the other side of the lampstand. On one branch there shall be 3 cups shaped like almond blossoms, each with calyx and petals. And on the next branch there shall be 3 cups shaped like almond blossoms, each with calyx and petals. So for all 6 branches issuing from the lampstand. And on the lampstand itself there shall be 4 cups shaped like almond blossoms, each with calyx and petals. A calyx of one piece with it under a pair of branches, and a calyx of one piece with it under the second pair of branches, and a calyx of one piece with it under the last pair of branches. So for all 6 branches issuing from the lampstand. Their calyces and their stems shall be of one piece with it, the whole of it, a single hammered piece of pure gold. Make it 7 lamps. The lamps shall be so mounted as to give the light on its front side, and its tongs and fire pans of pure gold. It shall be made with all these furnishings out of a talent of pure gold. Note well and follow the patterns for them that are being shown you on the mountain.
Thank you, Martine. Gary, would you like to read beginning at chapters 26?
As for the tabernacle, make it of 10 strips of cloth. Make these of fine twisted linen of blue, purple, and crimson yards, with the design of cherubim worked into them. The length of each cloth shall be 28 cubits, and the width of each cloth shall be 4 cubits. All the cloths to have the same measurements. 5 of the cloths shall be joined to one another, and the other 5 cloths shall be joined to one another. Make loops of blue wool on the edge of the outermost cloth of the one set, and do likewise on the edge of the outermost cloth of the other set. Make 50 loops on the one cloth and 50 loops on the edge of the end cloth of the other set, the loops to be opposite one another. And make 50 gold clasps and couple the cloths to one another with the clasps, so that the tabernacle becomes one whole.
Thank you, Gary. Let me invite Dave. Would you like to read a little bit beginning at verse 7?
Sure. You shall then make claws of goat's hair for a tent over the tabernacle. Make the claws 11 in number. The length of each cloth shall be 30 cubits, and the width of each cloth shall be 4 cubits. The 11 cloths to have the same measurements. Join 5 of the cloths by themselves and the other 6 cloths by themselves, and fold over the 6 cloths at the front of the tent. Make 50 loops on the edge of the outermost cloth of the one set and 50 loops on the edge of the cloth of the other set. Make 50 copper clasps and fit the clasps into the loops and couple the tent together so that it becomes one whole. As for the overlapping excess of the cloths of the tent, the extra half cloth shall overlap the back of the tabernacle, while the extra cubit at each length of the tent cloth shall hang down to the bottom of the 2 sides of the tabernacle and cover it. And make for a tent covering of tan ram skins and a covering of dolphin skins above.
Thank you, Dave. Steve, would you like to read a little bit beginning at verse 15?
Okay, we're 15.
Yes.
Okay. You shall make the planks for the tabernacle of acacia wood upright. The length of each plank shall be 10 cubits, and the width of each plank a cubit and a half. Each plank shall have 2 tenons parallel to each other. Do the same with all the planks of the tabernacle. Of the planks of the tabernacle, make 20 planks on the south side, making 40 silver sockets under the 20 planks. 2 sockets under the one plank for its 2 tenons, and 2 sockets under each following plank for its 2 tenons. And for the other side of the wall of the tabernacle, on the north side, 20 planks. With their 40 silver sockets, 2 sockets under the one plank, and 2 sockets under each following plank. And for the rear of the tabernacle, to the west, make 6 planks. And make 2 planks for the corners of the tabernacle at the rear. They shall match at the bottom and terminate alike at the top inside one ring. Thus shall it be with both of them. They shall form 2 corners. Thus there shall be 8 planks with their sockets of silver, 16 sockets, 2 sockets under the first plank, and 2 sockets under each of the other planks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Paul, would you like to read a little bit beginning at verse 26? And then you'll need to unmute if you'd like to join us. Okay, Paul, if you'd like to make some comments or join us, you'll need to unmute. We can't hear you, I'm sorry. So, okay, Paul, you'll fix your audio and then let me invite Margot, would you like to read there beginning at verse 26?
Sure. You shall make bars of acacia wood, 5 for the planks on one side wall of the tabernacle, 5 bars for the planks on the other side wall of the tabernacle, and 5 bars for the 5 planks on the walls of the tabernacle at the rear to the west. The center bar halfway up the planks shall run from end to end. Overlay the planks with gold and make their rings of gold as holders for the bars and overlay the bars with gold. Then set up the tabernacle according to the manner of it that you were shown on the mountain.
Thank you, Margot. Let me invite Robin. Would you like to read a little bit beginning at verse 31?
Yes, thank you. You shall make a curtain of blue, purple, and crimson yarns and fine twisted linen. It shall have a design of cherubim worked into it. Hang it upon 4 posts of acacia wood overlaid with gold, and having hooks of gold set in 4 sockets of silver. Hang the curtain under the clasps and carry the ark of the pact there behind the curtain, so that the curtain shall serve you as a partition between the holy and the holy of holies. Place the cover upon the ark of the pact in the holy of holies. Place the table outside the curtain and the lampstand by the south wall of the tabernacle opposite the table, which is to be placed by the north wall.
Thank you so much. Mark, would you like to start reading there at verse 36 and continue into chapter 27?
Yes, thank you. Shall make a screen for the entrance of the tent of blue, purple, and crimson yarns and fine twisted linen done in embroidery. Make 5 posts of acacia wood for the screen and overlay them with gold, their hooks being of gold, and cast for them 5 sockets of copper. You shall make the altar of acacia wood, 5 cubits long and 5 cubits wide. The altar is to be square and 3 cubits high. Make its horns on the 4 corners, the horns to be of one piece with it, and overlay it with copper. Make the pails for removing its ashes, as well as its scrapers, basins, flesh hooks, and fire pans. Make all its utensils of copper. Make for it a grating of meshwork in copper, and on the mesh make 4 copper rings at its 4 corners. Set the mesh below under the ledge of the altar so that it extends to the middle of the altar. And make poles for the altar, poles of acacia wood, and overlay them with copper. The poles shall be inserted into the rings so that the poles remain on the 2 sides of the altar when it is carried. Make a hollow of boards as you were shown on the mountain, so shall they be made.
Thank you so much, Mark. David and Susan, would you like to begin reading there at verse 9?
Yeah. You shall make the enclosure of the tabernacle. On the south side, 100 cubits of hangings of fine twisted linen for the length of the enclosure on that side, with its 20 posts and their 20 sockets of copper, the hooks and bands of the posts to be of silver. Again, 100 cubits of hangings for its length along the north side, with its 20 posts and their 20 sockets of copper, the hooks and bands of the posts to be of silver. Let me take it.
The point where I am.
12.
For the width of the enclosure on the west side, 50 cubits of hangings with their 10 posts and 10 sockets. For the width of the enclosure on the front, or the east side, 50 cubits. 15 cubits of hangings on the one flank with their 3 posts and their 3 sockets. 15 cubits of hangings on the other flank with their 3 posts and their 3 sockets. And for the gate of the enclosure, a screen of 20 cubits of blue, purple, and crimson yarns, and fine twisted linen done in embroidery with their 4 posts and their 4 sockets.
Thank you both so much. Let me invite Justin, would you like to read beginning there at verse 17?
All the pillars around the courtyard shall have silver bands, silver hooks, and copper sockets. The length of the courtyard shall be 100 cubits, and the width 50 by 50 cubits. The length of the hangings shall be 5 cubits of twisted fine linen, and their sockets shall be of copper. All the implements of the Mishkan for all its labor, and all its pegs, and all the pegs of the courtyard shall be copper.
Thank you. And that is our entire Torah portion for this week, Parshat Terumah. What I'd like to do is to spend a few moments sharing with you a little bit of a focus study, and then we'll open it up and everyone can share their own thoughts and reflections about what we've just read. And I'd like to begin by looking at the graphic that I supplied at the top of the study sheet. And by the way, if there's anyone who didn't get a copy of the study sheet and you'd like to have it regularly sent to you, please let me know. Please email me. But the graphic is a painting by a great contemporary Israeli artist, Yoram Ra'anan. We've actually seen his work several times in our studies together. And he has entitled this piece, The Cherubing. And if you look at it, you see these two round figures with wings perhaps coming off of their back, facing towards one another, blue on either side of them, and this bright yellow in between the two of them. Let me share with you what the artist himself, Yoram Ra'anan, said about this piece. This work came into being after a lot of searching and scraping through many layers of thick paint. All the cutting away and carving created a sense of motion in the wings and introduced a new kind of light to the work. Wings are coverings that both cover and conceal, but it is in the space between them where the greatest light is revealed. We're going to explore a little bit more about this light that appears between the two cherubim, and we're going to try and understand what is happening within this week's Torah portion. So on the one level, the narrative level, the literal level, what we are bearing witness to are instructions for the building of some kind of sanctuary space, what's known as the Mishkan. The very opening of it, if you will, provokes our great commentator, Rashi, who's trying to figure out what exactly is this project called the building of the Mishkan? What is it all about? And so he takes our early verse, let them make me a sanctuary. And Rashi has this bit of commentary to that verse. He says, it means, let them make me a house for holiness. So what exactly is this building project that we read about in this week's Torah portion? Well, Rashi makes it clear that at least for him and for many other commentators, it's not the object itself that is the focus of this building project. It is, the significance is something that will happen. It seems to be that the Mishkan is being designed as a framework for something that is at this moment intangible, something that is in process, something that this project will in fact induce into the world, induce into this particular community, and as we'll see with our next bit of commentary, induce perhaps into the very people themselves. It's interesting and fascinating to note, I think, how much material Torah dedicates to this building project called the Mishkan. When we compare it with some other material in Torah, it's really quite significant. Torah provides one chapter on the creation of the universe. It provides 3 chapters on the revelation at Mount Sinai. It provides 11 chapters about the story of the Exodus from Egypt. In total, there will be 13 chapters on the making of the Mishkan. And what's significant is both the amount of space, the amount of words, the amount of material that Torah dedicates to this particular project compared with, in particular, the other projects that I just mentioned. But also, the Torah seems to place far more emphasis on the construction of this Mishkan than on its implementation, than on its use. So there's something not only significant about the project itself, but as Torah emphasizes, it is the actual activity of the building of it more than the implementation and use of it that should draw our attention. And number 2 on the study sheet is from Siftei Chachamim, which is a super commentary on Rashi's commentary and is compiled by Shabtai ben Joseph Bas, who lived about 1641 to 1718, spent much time in Amsterdam. And his commentary, if you will, on Rashi's commentary, he says, let them make me a sanctuary, let them make me a house for holiness. He writes, is so that I may dwell b'tocham, in their midst. So he emphasizes and makes clear for us, the project is not just so that building a dwelling place for God to dwell in, but it is a project designed to have God dwell among the people. So this emphasis on the fact that it's not just a dwelling that God can dwell in it, but among them, indicates that somehow this project involves us as human beings, that somehow we are involved, or the project involves itself in us, or perhaps better stated, that it's going to induce a force that is somehow going to penetrate itself into us. So with these just early bits of commentary, what we come up with is that we have a construction activity in which something happens for us, or something happens among us or within us. So let's look a little bit further. And well, first I'm reminded of a verse from Isaiah, which we are familiar with from our prayer services, our daily prayer service. The Kedusha, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Sebaot Melo Kol Haaretz Kevodo. Holy, holy, holy is Adonai of hosts. The whole earth is full of God's glory. The whole earth is full of God's glory. So let me step back and kind of take a little bit of basic commentary from the Hasidic tradition, which of course, again, always focuses on kind of the psychological, internal dimension of one's life, and asks the question, that tradition asks, well, why are we here? Why do we exist? And the answer is, in that tradition, we're here to make a home for God in the material world. Well, if you look at Isaiah and this blessing that we recite as part of the daily prayer service, Adonai of hosts, the whole earth is full of God's glory. Isn't God already here? Doesn't God permeate the material world? Why do we need to do anything in order to have God dwell here? And so I think the message seems to be that God can be in the world without being at home in it. God could be in the world without being at home in it. And it seems our job is to make God at home in this world. So one of the most striking aspects of this Mishkan project is what our artist, Yoram Ra'anan, has focused on in his work, the cherubim. So if you look at number 5 on the study sheet, we have our verse, make 2 cherubim, and there will I meet with you, says God. So here's this fascinating dynamic of these cherubim. The cherubim create this space. They are these beings at opposite ends of the ark, in which will be placed the 10 Commandments, the pact bearing witness to the moment at Mount Sinai. And these are, on the one hand, they are 2 beings that are jointly engaged in a project. They are overseeing, if you will, this beautiful placement for the witnessing the pact that witnessed what happened at Mount Sinai. And they are there both staring at that downward into the cabinet where the Ten Commandments are, and somehow they are simultaneously engaged at looking at one another. So that, and by their placement, with their gazes, they create this space between the two of them. So they're involved in a common project, and neither one is seeking to displace the other. They are just locked into this gaze, both at the law and at one another. You know, the cherubim was one of the sources of great derision by the Romans. There's lots of stories about the reaction of the Romans when they were able to break into the temple, and they broke into the Holy of Holies with kind of great anticipation that they were going to finally see this God that the Jewish people had been worshiping. And one set of stories, the Romans come out of there laughing and kind of bewildered that there's nothing there. There's nothing to see. And so they laugh about that. And then another line of stories has them laughing about the cherubim that they find on the ark. And one line of stories has them encountering these cherubim who are kind of not only gazing, but they're kind of touching one another. They're locked in a relationship with one another. And so the Romans come out and they bring out the cherubim and they laugh about them and they laugh at them as kind of, oh, look, it's just this erotic set of these erotic idols that the Israelites were engaged with. Or look, they're just these two simple creatures that separate from one another, and this is what they've been worshiping. And so for the Romans, they couldn't comprehend two beings that just were staring at one another and it simultaneously engaged with the law. For them, the notion that two beings could somehow just be satisfied with being in a relationship with each other and with guarding over the law was incomprehensible, because the Romans were engaged in a culture of power struggles, of defeating others, lest one be defeated. So the notion that two beings could just enjoy one another and not seek to displace one another was incomprehensible and a source of derision for them. So, yeah, we have a more contemporary commentator, Walter Benjamin, who wrote a book called Understanding Brecht, Bertolt Brecht, the great playwright. And he wrote this, he wrote, "Friendship does not abolish the distance between human beings. It brings that distance to light." What Walter Benjamin, it seems to be saying, is friendship is about respecting the other and allowing the other to have one's own existence. And to allow someone to have one's own existence necessarily means that there is a separation between the two of you. You're not seeking to overpower the others. And true friendship, he says, means that separation between the two of you is charged with meaning. So that returns us to, for me, the title of this week's study session, To Be at Home. What does it mean to be at home? It means to be in a place that is receptive to your presence. That's what this project, apparently, the Mishkan, is all about. To act in a way, to have a relationship with the other that is receptive to the other's presence. that allows it to dwell with you, to allow it to dwell among you. And so it means to be in a place that is solicitous, that draws out, that is solicitous of your purest, healthiest needs and desires, a place where you are your true self. I was very fortunate during my year of study in Israel to study at the Hartman Institute. And, Rabbi Daniel Hartman wrote this a few years ago that was in the Los Angeles Jewish Journal about space. It's number 7 on the study sheet. The defining feature of a Jewish public space is that it must be a safe one. Safe not merely from harm, safe not merely from a Hobbesian definition of a state of nature as being a state of war against all, but safe in the sense that individuals who enter it know that their well-being is a concern of all who share in that space. A space is a safe one when all who inhabit it are fellow keepers. A space wherein the individuals recognize their responsibility to override their personal interests and not merely refrain from harming others, but actually care for and respond to their needs. So we return to the Mishkan. We read the story and we easily read it as this is literally a building project with all these beautiful materials in which the Israelites are constructing some kind of worship space. We move beyond the literal level, the level of the narrative itself. What we find there, I think, at the spiritual level, is that this is really a construction project of the human self and the human community. One that will solicit the best from us and create a home. And we do that when we marshal our personal resources in service of that which elicits us beyond our narrow selfhood, beyond mere preservation of self at all costs, beyond fear of other, to a place called home, where our true selves blossom in a nurturing gaze across the space, in the middle of which, as our artist has taught us, is the greatest light of all. So with that, I would love to open up and have each and every one of you, if you'd like to share some thoughts or comments you have, you raise your hand. Susan, please go ahead and unmute and share with us.
So there's 2 things that really struck me in this Torah portion. One is that the instructions for building the Mishkan, and as you say, it's not just a physical structure, is being given to these people that until recently were slaves in Egypt building. So it's something that they know how to do, but they've kind of not had anything to do. And now God's telling them to do holy work. And I just love that parallel, that they're now being given something substantive to focus on, and that it's holy work.
Beautiful.
And the other thing that's kind of similar is that the opening line says, and I spoke to Moses saying, tell the Israelite people to bring me gifts, and you shall accept gifts for me from every person whose heart is so moved. And that just speaks to me about the importance of giving from the heart. that whatever we give, whatever we do in our lives, that it's really important that we do it from the heart.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you. Margot, would you like to share something?
I'm sorry, I can't get past the literal. These are poor people. How on earth were they to amass this much gold and silver? But it just, I can't get past the literal of how they were to amass the cost of this Mishkan must have been enormous, even in those days and in these days. And I get the image of in Mexico City seeing people mired in poverty on their knees crawling toward a cathedral. The cathedral, of course, is magnificent. I don't remember the church in Mexico, with gold, like this, with the gold, and so I just can't get past the literal of how they got how they were to get the materials.
Beautiful. Perfect. That's a great observation. So I'm going to call Mark in just a second. And I just want to respond that some commentators, they look very carefully at the Hebrew here. And the Hebrew says, uses the word for taking. The Israelites shall take for me gifts. And so the interpretation there is that all of this material, all the wood, that to have been carrying all that wood aside from the rest of the materials would have been an enormous project. So surely when it came time for this kind of a project, wouldn't they perhaps have found traders along the way that they could have bought or traded stuff for this material? So the commentators say, they took this material with them out of Egypt. They brought this material with them. And why that's significant is because it begin to think about the frame of mind of these people who have been enslaved and now they're going to be set free. The notion, if I were there, I would have been running as fast as I could as soon as I was told you can go. I would have, yeah, let's go. But the notion of taking time to have gathered up material means, first of all, that they anticipated that there would be this opportunity to express gratitude, to have some kind of ritualized relationship with the one who is enabling them to become free, and that they had a desire to also express that gratitude. It was a great deal of foreplanning and a great deal of effort to do this. So that gives us some sense of the devotion and the anticipation and the desire, even among a people who had been held in slavery for so long that their first inclination was not merely to just rush out as fast as they could, but to make preparations so that they could express gratitude and do something that would ritualize and solemnize this relationship with the source of all life. So that
well, in Exodus, isn't there a part where he says, gather up your jewelry to the things to get ready to move, and one of them was your jewelry.
Yeah. Thank you. So thank you, Mark. So let me now turn to Mark. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, you just expressed more eloquently than I ever could what I was going to say about what was stated in Shabbat Bo about taking these elements of gold and silver and precious from the Egyptians, but they were actually given to them, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
But there was something I wanted to point out. Well, first of all, I want to look at number 3 and the Hasidic interpretation. Why are we here? To make a home for God in the material world. Well, first of all, do we accept that there are two worlds, a material world and a spiritual world? Well, to me, when I read this, the Hasidim are almost assuming that God was already in the spiritual world. But I'm not sure that that's true. And why would the material world take precedence over the spiritual world? Because they were freshly out of Egypt and they were just beginning to establish a spiritual relationship with this strange being. To me, the expression of the material world seems a little premature. So I'd like to just put that out there for people to discuss and you to respond.
Great. Okay. And others who haven't, Gary, go ahead, Gary.
I too wanted to comment on number 3. I interpreted it a little, I guess everyone interprets it a little bit differently, but when I read it, one of my ongoing themes coming to Torah study is to try to figure out why are we here. For me, that's always the big question. And I've always looked for the answers I found or the interpretations I found within Torah have always led to me. Why am I here? To be a good person, to grow, to bring Torah to the masses. It's always been personal. And on number 3, it says to make a home for God in the material world. And so now all of a sudden, the onus is off of me. I'm not here for me. I'm here to do something for God. I'm not ready to comment on that because that's a pretty heavy task and it's going to give me something to ponder, but it just spoke to me. I'm going to be now rethinking why I'm here for a little while. So it was a powerful line.
So Gary, Kabbalah, if you takes this in a radical direction, Kabbalah says basically that how we behave in this world has an impact not just on ourselves, not just on the human beings around us, but has an impact on the source of all of existence as well. It's a very revolutionary and radical notion that human beings can somehow have an impact on God. But the very roots of it seem to be in what is being laid out here, both in the text and in the commentary. And that gets it, I think, at what you are, in a sense, hinting at, which is, what's the difference between me and God? There seems to be implicit in what you're saying. If you try to put all this stuff together, you say, I'm here to make myself a better person. I'm here to make this world a better person. Gee, I hadn't thought I was here to make it a better place for God. But there's some kind of relational dynamic involved there. To the extent that we transform ourselves, we refine our character. And the more we do that, the more that we call the divine comes out into the world, because we are infused with that. We're made in God, the image of God. That bit of DNA is within us. And the question is, what are we going to do with that bit of heritage, that bit of, if you will, spiritual genetics? Are we going to be fearful of it? Are we going to grieve about our place in the world? Are we going to seek and displace others so that we can have more of a place in the world? That was Cain's response, if you will, to Abel. This world isn't big enough for the two of us. So there's some line of both moral and ethical and spiritual power here that is saying, when you focus on defining your character, when you engage in that bit of gazing at the person across from you in a way that allows the person to gaze back at you and create that space of mutual respect, then the light of God seems to shine between the two of you. You do release that energy into the world through your behavior. And that has a transformative effect on all of existence. So thanks very much, Gary, for raising those profound questions and thoughts. Ruth, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, what I'm thinking kind of ties in a little bit to what you were just talking about is I was really taken with the painting this time. I kept on looking at that painting and looking at it, and while everyone's talking and more is revealed, at least to me, it seems very dynamic in how the artist did it, in a sense that when they describe, the description in the Torah sounds fixed. And then, of course, there's the paradox of the cherubim, which we've talked about in previous years, looking down, looking at each other. And then, so I was taken in the painting how much movement and dynamicism there was in the painting and the way it was done. And I think of, it brought many images to mind. One was that of like hummingbirds, because the fluttering wings, because just today we were walking, we saw beautiful, beautiful hummingbirds just this afternoon. So of course I thought of that. And then I'm looking at the light, and is the light coming down or is it going up? And I thought, it looks like the light's going up, like they're looking down and there's wonderful light coming up from the Torah, like the art, the laws, the light's streaming up, and I'm going, wow, look at that. And then as I looked at the face at the cherubim, they became more like, oh, I think I see face, started to see something there. It wasn't just a blob, like, oh, and then it just was fascinating how the artist took what was like supposedly fixed, but then through the art showed how dynamic it's almost like something you can't describe. Like, how can you be the paradox? Well, how can you be looking down at each other at the same time? But somehow through the painting, I felt that was kind of achieved in some bizarre way that I certainly can't explain. Anyway, that was my take.
Thank you, Ruth. That's so beautiful. I'm so glad you took it back to the painting. So I'm just going to read the very opening words from our artist about his painting. He writes, "This work came into being after a lot of searching and scraping through many layers of thick paint."
Yeah.
Perhaps our artist is just talking about what's happening on the canvas, but I think not. I think this artist is expressing on canvas something spiritual and psychological as well, which is when we do a lot of searching and scraping away of the layers that we build up upon ourselves through our encounters with the world as a form of self-protection, as a way of denial of ourselves. When we do that, we make it difficult for the divine to come into this world. It requires a lot of searching and scraping away the layers that we have built up as forms of self-protection to let the light come out. I think that's really what he's talking about. Thank you so much for bringing it back to the painting. Anyone else want to share something? Go ahead, Susan. Go ahead and unmute and share with us.
Well, back to number 3 that Mark and Gary brought up, I often, atomic energy is something that builds and builds and builds on itself. I've felt on those times in my life when I've been able to get close to that's what happens between us and God, that the closer we get to God, the more energy is given to God and that God gives to us. And it's like some kind of reciprocal energy force that builds up and builds up when given the opportunity. And that God probably wouldn't exist as well without us, and we wouldn't exist as well without God.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you. Anna, you have something to share.
I just wanted to say, Susan, maybe, and Rabbi, why are there 2 angels hovering over it?
Go ahead. No,
That's it. No, that's what I want to say. Why are there 2? and not one ark, but two angels. You have to, like, there's a reciprocity of
The
the
rest,
lesson right there.
the reciprocity is profound. I mean, it's all Torah ultimately is about relationships. It's about relationships. It's about creating healthy and sacred relationships that allows more to come into the world rather than displacing and becoming. Well, here it is. We didn't really get into it. Number 4 in the study sheet. The Holy Blessed One does not behave tyrannically to God's creatures. From Talmud. I put it in there because as I believe it was Susan who mentioned earlier about how the Israelites were under a tyrant and they lived under a tyrant for hundreds of years. And so that became normal. That became what was deemed to be perhaps almost inevitable. That's the way life is, that there are the powerful and there are the weak. And the weak will always have to serve under the powerful. And so the Talmud wants to emphasize that as these people are released from Egypt, it's not that they are merely trading one tyrant for another tyrant. What they are entering into is a relationship with a sovereign who wants to empower people, who wants to elicit from them their own initiative, their own sense of self-governing. That's what we talked about last week. This trembling power that the Israelites experienced when they realized that now they were being told they had the power and responsibility to create community. They weren't just going to be living under another tyrant. So thank you so much for reminding us about that aspect of it. And any other comments? Go ahead, Ruth.
Well, I'm saying, I was also affected by, I think it's numbers 5 and 6. I don't have it in front of me, of the quotations, and it really, for me, it was very meaningful. The whole description of like what is a safe space and what makes this space safe, and there's some beautiful words there about ideas of, it's not, it's of course it's physical, are you physically safe, but it's so much more than that. I thought that was beautiful, and I realized that for me that's very meaningful. Like, if I think really am honest, like the whole process of studying Torah and like engaging in this, what we're doing here is all about like a safe space. Can we express ourselves? Are we free? Can we speak in a way and feel that we're going to be heard? And that's like such a huge part of it for me. So I realize that's like really critical, the idea of a safe space and how rare that's a very rare thing. It's rare.
Thank you so much for, go ahead, Margot.
I can't get away from the literal. I'm sorry. And I'm thinking of a story from American history, and the Torah synagogue and what it looks like inside. And during it's said that during the Revolutionary War, it was a very cold winter, and the British were going through and they wanted the wood. The homes were made out of wood, and they were destroying people's homes so that they could build fires to keep warm. And they came upon the doors of the Torah synagogue, and they opened the doors, and there above the Torah were 2 lions, not cherubim, but 2 lions guarding the Torah. And they assumed that somehow or other the people who came into this synagogue were loyalists and not Tories. And they did not burn and they did not destroy that Torah synagogue.
Well, Margot, sometimes
I went to services when we were there. It's north and outside the sit upstairs.
Where's Torah located? Philadelphia? Boston?
Well, it's in Newport.
Newport, Rhode Island.
Newport, Rhode Island. Yeah, we were there for a meeting, and
it sounds fascinating.
So, Margaret, sometimes the literal does come to save the symbolic and the spiritual. So thank you very much for
That's
taking.
a good story.
Okay, a couple of last things. Paul?
Yeah, could you hear me finally?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm 400 miles away, but I really feel close to the rabbi. And so I'm from the old synagogue, and it really gives me a pleasure to hear that what I heard back here happening is happening up there. And you have a treasure there, because the conversations I'm hearing, it's been about 1.5 years since he's left, that it's coming back. And so I just want to express my thanks to the rabbi and also to your group, because it looks like you have the same kind of people, your place, as we have down here. So thank
Some
you.
of us are extremely similar to the people at the old place.
Where are
It's
you?
almost exactly the same.
Where are you? You said you're 400 miles away. Where are you?
I'm in, my voice is from Brooklyn, but on the other hand, I'm in Torrance, California.
Torrance, okay.
Yeah.
Well, let me conclude by saying that the cherubim were physically very close to one another. They were embedded in this cover on the ark. We all may be 400 or perhaps even more miles apart. We've been blessed not only by having this kind of technology that can bring us together. We're blessed by having rich text that brings us together in a way that helps us create a gaze of respect, curiosity about one another, and elicit the best from us. And because Paul being the last to speak, I'm hoping it's not inappropriate for me to say congratulations on being selected by the Yiddish Book Center in Amherst, Massachusetts for an oral interview with them about your relationship to Yiddish, and I hope that goes well. And we're so grateful that you can join us this evening. We look forward to many more gatherings together. And so, my friends, as we gaze at one another, just want to say I'm deeply grateful for each of your presence and that the beautiful light that we bring out into the world through our encounters with one another. Mark, you have, yes.
I'd like to part with a musical riff on one of the verses, if I might.
Please.
Please.
Hey.
Hey, go.
And let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. And Rabbi, you'll remember this. Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you.
Amen.
That's wonderful.
Thank you so much, everyone. God bless you all. Be well. Look forward to being together with you next week. Bye-bye.
Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem.
Baruch Hashem.
Hashem.